I cheated and got a Muslim woman pregnant in Iran after the war was over. Now I live to regret every single action that led to all of this. It was June 2003 when it all began. The war was over, and we were supposed to depart for Memphis, but our flight got delayed for the next 5 months. There we were, stuck in a foreign land, waiting for the paperwork, the flights, the clearance. It felt like time had frozen, like we were trapped in a limbo I couldn't escape. We were told it would only take a few days. Days turned into weeks, and weeks turned into months. I was stranded. Ensure to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more true infidelity confessions. The first couple of weeks, I convinced myself that the delay was just a temporary inconvenience, a minor bump in the road. But as time dragged on, I grew restless. I missed my wife, her voice, her touch, the life we had built together. But the distance between us, both physical and emotional, was growing wider by the day. I tried to keep in touch, sending her messages, calling her when I could, but it never felt the same. There was a coldness in her responses, a distance I couldn't ignore. I didn't blame her. I couldn't even blame the circumstances. It was me. Every time I spoke to her, I could hear the strain in her voice, the longing that wasn't reciprocated on my end. I knew I should have been there for her, emotionally, physically, but I wasn't. The longer I stayed, the more I felt the separation. My thoughts started drifting. I couldn't help it. And then I met Miriam. She came into my life during one of those lonely days when the world felt like it was spinning in place. She was a 30-year-old Muslim woman, a single mom who had lost her husband during the war. She was beautiful, not just in her appearance, but in the way she carried herself, strong, resilient, and quietly graceful. And, honestly, I was drawn to her the moment she walked into the room. It wasn't just her looks. It was her kindness, her understanding. She'd come over often to help me with little things, cleaning, organizing, taking care of things I had no energy for. It felt natural, comforting, like I was allowed to feel something again. And it felt wrong. As days turned into weeks, Miriam became a constant in my life. We spent hours talking, laughing, and sharing stories. The loneliness, the guilt I had been feeling, started to fade. She made me feel needed. She made me feel seen. The kind of attention I wasn't receiving back home. And before I knew it, I was spending more time with her than I should have. What started as small gestures, like offering help around the house, grew into something far more complicated. We got closer, and then something changed. I was in too deep. It was a cold Friday evening when Miriam was at my place. The city outside was quiet, the lights casting soft shadows across the apartment. The warmth from the small heater filled the room as she set a bowl of macaroni in front of me. Her smile was soft, inviting, and it made my heart ache, knowing what I was about to do, what I had already started doing. I should have been home with my wife. Instead, I was here, tangled in something that went beyond just kindness, something I couldn't easily explain. We ate dinner together, talking about everything and nothing. The conversation flowed easily, as it always did. We laughed, shared stories, and in those moments, the weight of the world seemed lighter. Miriam's laughter was like music, and I found myself drawn to her in ways that scared me. There was a connection between us, undeniable and electric, and no matter how hard I tried to distance myself, it kept pulling me back. After dinner, we settled on the couch. She sat close to me, her presence calming, yet the tension was palpable. Every inch of space between us felt like a barrier that neither of us wanted to cross, but both of us were already standing at the edge. I couldn't stop my thoughts from drifting, from wondering what it would feel like if I let go. "Miriam," I whispered, my voice barely audible. She turned to face me, her eyes soft but searching. "I love you." The words left my lips before I even realized they were there, and as they hung in the air, the weight of them hit me. I had never expected this. I had come here to distract myself, to fill the void left by months of isolation. But what I had found was something deeper, something I couldn't ignore. Miriam's eyes widened for a split second before her lips curved into a gentle smile. "I love you too," she replied, her voice just as tender. Her words were like a balm to my soul, and I felt a rush of warmth flood my chest. But there was something inside me that recoiled, a voice deep down warning me that this feeling, this connection, was dangerous. Before I could think any further, she leaned in, and our lips met in a kiss that was both gentle and urgent. It felt like time stopped, like nothing else mattered in that moment. Her touch, her warmth, everything about her felt so right, and yet so wrong. The kiss deepened, and I found myself unable to pull away, caught in the storm of emotions I couldn't control. In a flash, we did it twice that day. But as soon as the kiss ended, reality came crashing back. I pulled away, my breath shaky, my heart racing. I could hear the distant echo of my wife's face in my mind, her voice, her smile. I tried to shake the thought, to push it away, but it wouldn't leave. I sat back, my head in my hands, guilt gnawing at me. Miriam, sensing the change in the air, looked at me with concern. She reached out, placing a hand on my shoulder. "Are you okay?" she asked softly. Yeah, I replied, though I knew the truth was far from that. I wasn't okay. I was far from okay. I was a man caught between two worlds, one that was already slipping away from me, and one that I had no place in. I had allowed myself to feel something that wasn't just a distraction anymore. It was real. The connection, the chemistry, everything. But so was the guilt. My wife, the one I had promised to love and cherish, was far away, living her life without knowing what I had done, what I was still doing. I tried to convince myself that this was just friendship, that it was nothing more than the bond two people form when they're thrown together in such circumstances. But deep down, I knew the truth. It wasn't just friendship. It was far more. Miriam moved closer again, but this time, I held back. My heart wanted to stay, to continue this, to give in to the desire that was so strong. But my mind screamed at me to stop, to do the right thing, to go back to the life I had left behind. "I need to go," I said, my voice hoarse. Miriam didn't protest. She just nodded, her face soft with understanding. But in her eyes, I saw the hurt, the same hurt I was feeling. The kiss was over. The moment had passed. I stood up, my legs unsteady, and walked to the door. I couldn't bring myself to look at her again. I couldn't face the mess I had made of everything. But I knew one thing for sure. This wasn't the end. I had crossed a line, and now there was no going back. I left, stepping out into the night, the cool air hitting my face, but inside, I was burning with regret. That night, just before my departure, Miriam came to my place one last time. The tension was thick in the air, and I could feel it, the weight of the finality, the gravity of what was about to happen. She knocked softly on the door, and when I opened it, there she stood, as beautiful and serene as she had always been, but with an undeniable sadness in her eyes. She didn't speak at first. Instead, she just walked in, her presence filling the space that had once been warm with laughter, but now felt cold with the knowledge of our impending separation. We stood there in silence for a moment. I could feel the words between us, words that neither of us could say. The apology, the gratitude, the longing. But nothing came out. I was torn, my heart a battle between the love I had for my wife and the undeniable connection I'd formed with Miriam over the past few months. I had allowed myself to feel something for her that I shouldn't have, and now it was too late to undo it. Without saying anything, Miriam walked toward me and gently cupped my face with both of her hands. My breath caught in my throat as her eyes locked with mine, searching for something, perhaps for some reassurance that we could still be, even for a fleeting moment, what we had become. The silence between us was unbearable, yet so intimate. And then, without warning, she leaned in. The kiss was soft at first, gentle, as if it were a question, a plea for understanding, for forgiveness. It lingered between us, filled with all the emotions we hadn't allowed ourselves to express. I kissed her back, feeling the rush of everything that we had shared, the weight of it all, our secret, our connection, and the inevitable ending. For a moment, it felt like nothing else mattered. But in the back of my mind, I knew the truth. In what felt like microseconds, we had done it twice that cold night. I pulled away slowly, my hands trembling as they fell to my sides. Her eyes were wet, and I could see the raw emotion reflected in them. "I'm sorry," she whispered, as if she were the one who needed to apologize. But I was the one who had failed. Failed her, failed my wife, and failed myself. I didn't say anything back. What could I say? I didn't have the words to explain how I felt. There was nothing that could make this right. She stayed for a while longer, just sitting beside me on the couch. We didn't speak much. We didn't need to. We both knew that this was the end of something real, but also the beginning of the hardest part of my life. I was leaving her behind. The woman who had filled a void in me, the one who had shown me care when I thought I couldn't feel anything. She was everything I didn't expect to find, but exactly what I needed at the time. And I had betrayed that. I had betrayed all of it. As the time came for me to go, I could feel the finality of the moment in every inch of my being. She stood up, her face still damp with the tears we hadn't spoken aloud, but both of us knowing it was time to let go. "Goodbye," she said quietly, her voice barely audible. "Goodbye, Miriam," I whispered, my heart breaking with every syllable. I turned to leave, but before I could step out the door, I turned back to her one last time. She was standing by the window, staring out at the city that had witnessed our fleeting connection. She didn't turn around, but I could feel her gaze on me, as though she was waiting for me to stay. But I couldn't. I had to leave. I had no choice. I walked away, my footsteps echoing in the hallway as I headed to the airport, knowing that I was leaving behind the only woman who had made me feel alive again. Alive in a way I hadn't felt in years. I left her there, in that apartment, in that life I had built with her, and stepped into the car that would take me back to the life I had almost destroyed. The city passing by, the weight of the guilt and confusion building with every mile. My thoughts were chaotic, filled with regret and a longing for something I could never have. What had I done? What could I say when I finally saw my wife again? Would she ever be able to look at me the same way? As the car sped toward the airport, the future seemed uncertain. But one thing was clear. No matter where I was headed, I knew I was already lost. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to my channel for more engaging content. Stay tuned, because there's so much more coming your way. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.